Be Frankie.
Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix.
Yo, what's good? It's your boy B-Dell. If you're new to this channel, hit the like button, hit the share button, hit the subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. Today, I'm going to be breaking down the international and geopolitical apparatus and how it coincides with the global ecological humanitarian crisis. Now, all this works in conjunction with the prophecy of Yakub, because he said, I will create a people that will rule over you for 6,000 years, and the 6,000 years is up. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, in the comments, put the 6,000 years is up. It's up. Put that in the comments. Everybody in the comments put the 6,000 years is up, because we in that time period right now, right? We definitely in that time period, because everything that you're seeing taking place right now is basically the blueprint of the beginning of the end, right? So we're going to get into the geopolitical aspects of it, right? And we're going to get into the aspects of Yakubs creation and how the coronal holes in these coronal mass ejections have the ability to manipulate everything that's connected to third density, right? Because like I said, human consciousness has the ability to manipulate physical matter. So the more you raise up in vibration, it's going to create this transmission from the sun that's going to manipulate Shaitan, right? Shaitan is a personification of the beast, who is also the Canaanite, who has the cursed genetics, right? That's because their genetics doesn't harmonize with the energies of the sun. So we're going to get into that as we get through the presentation. Now, everything that you're seeing taking place right now is basically the embodiment of prophecy, right? Which is the science of the end time, what we call eschatology. So everything that you're seeing between Israel and Iran is already connected to the blueprint of monotheistic religions when you're talking about biblical context, right? Now, this publication came out not too long ago, and it says that Iran announced on Iranian state TV, tonight there will be a great surprise that the world will remember for centuries. The Chinese and the Russians and the deployed military ships into the Pacific. Pakistan has issued a warning that if nuclear weapons are used on Iran, they will use nuclear weapons on Israel. If any country comes to the aid of Israel's defense, Pakistan will enter the conflict and utilize their military in defense of Iran. There have been rumors of United States warplanes and ships being moved into the Gulf near Bahrain. So, like I said, it's one of those things where you have to be very meticulous of the situation that's taking place on the planet right now. So this all coincides with Jonah chapter 3, verse 5. It says that Nineveh shall be overthrown, and Nineveh is another nomenclature title for the term America, right? Because Nineveh was also connected to the Assyrian Empire, which is what we call ancient Babylon. So America, the son of Jonah, right? So Jonah chapter 3, verse 5 works in conjunction with the judgment process of America. Because one thing you got to understand about Iran is strategic allies with China and Russia. They're basically the bodyguards for Iran. China and Russia are the bodyguards for Iran. I need you to understand that, right? Now, so there's a video that basically demonstrates that everything that you're seeing taking place right now. It says, such and such to America, Iranian parliament burns U.S. flag and threatens to nuclear strike on America, right? Not a coincidence. Now, remember, the World Economic Forum, they said that it was inevitable that the grid is going to shut down eventually. So all this works in conjunction with everything when you're talking about Donald Trump building the Golden Dome, right? So I told you, everything operates from a aspect of a Hegelian dialectic principle. Problem, reaction, solution. Who's the problem? Iran. What is the reaction? Build a golden dome. What is solution? The solution is 9 times out of 10 is diabolical, because the solution is something that's going to be facilitated by subjugating humanity under a totalitarian feudalistic regime. So it's one of those things where they're basically trying to do the same thing with 9/11. Remember the times of 9/11, what happened was is that that's when they extended the Patriot Act, right? Which gave mass surveillance over the United States of America, and mass surveillance, which basically turned America into a police state. So now when you look at this right here, it says Iran threatens to attack the US, UK, and France if they assist Israel. Because one thing you got to understand about Israel basically works in conjunction with the deep state shadow government, because the deep state shadow government is basically the embodiment of the black hats. And the black hats is also known as Democrats. And the Democrats are the ones that's connected to these entities right here, right? So the CIA supports it, NATO, the EU, which is the European Union. Then you got the liberal media. All these entities right here support Israel, right? Because I told you before, there is no such thing as democracy. It's not in the Bill of Rights. It's not in the United States Constitution. It's not even in the damn Star Spangled Banner. There is no such thing as democracy, because it's basically the embodiment of fraud. So this is why they like to propagate the 14th Amendment, because it was a fraudulent contract. So when you have a fraudulent contract, that means that you created a synthetic corporate system that is connected to a synthetic people, because the deep state in itself is also Israel, right? And Israel is also connected to the bloodlines of the Khazarian mafia, right? So we're going to get into that as we get through the presentation. Now, it says Iran ready missiles and other military assets to target the United States bases in the event that the United States enters the war, right? Then you got this going on right here. Now, there's a video that works in conjunction with this publication, because everything that you see in the video, they show you in the airport the number 33. We all know that 33 is a Freemasonic number, right? Because you also got to understand that Baghdad is on the 33rd parallel. We're going to get into that as well. So it says that Israel may become uninhabitable in days. Warnings for you in the coming days: leave occupied territories, because certainly there won't be inhabitable in the future. Taking shelter underground will not bring safety. Do not let criminal regime use you as human shields, right? Now, you also can't negate this. It says that Iran have signed the deal, right? Which is a deal. What is a deal? A deal is a brief. A brief is a covenant. A covenant is a contract that they made with other entities. As I told you before, Donald Trump is a white hat, and a white hat plays both sides, because he's a chaos agent provocateur that's being used as a weapon to bring about this totalitarian feudalistic system that's based on cybernetics, where they want to merge human with machine, right? So it says Iran should have signed the deal. I told them to sign. What a shame and waste of human life. Simply stated, Iran cannot have nuclear weapons. I said it over and over again. Everyone should immediately evacuate Tehran. Now, Iran threatens to strike the United States bases if conflict erupts over a nuclear program. Now, I'm going to show you a video that demonstrates everything that I'm basically saying. This is a very important video, ladies and gentlemen, because everything that you're seeing taking place right now is basically the embodiment of so-called prophecy. I told you the Bible is a Freemasonic playbook. So if you get into the esoteric codex of the Bible, you will be able to code the codexes that's inside the publication, right? So I'm gonna show you this video for a second. So we finna get into it. If you're new to the channel, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, share this video, right? And put in the comments that 6,000 years is up. We in that time period, ladies and gentlemen. So I'm going to show you this video here. Hold on for a second. All right. All right, let's get the party going. I'm finna play the video.
Иран выполнял все взятые на себя обязательства по известному соглашению, о котором мы сейчас упомянули. Все. К Ирану невозможно предъявить никаких претензий. Затем Соединенные Штаты в одностороннем порядке решили выйти из этого соглашения, а европейцы предложили требовать от Ирана, чтобы он выполнял взятые на себя обязательства. Ну это, вы уж меня простите, но это какой-то бред. Не Иран же вышел из этого соглашения. США вышли. Бывший президент Трамп взял и принял решение выйти из соглашения. А европейцы говорят, да, это не очень хорошо, что американцы вышли, но вы, иранцы, все соблюдаете. С какого хрена-то?
Now, I need you to understand something. The Iranians are also known as the Carmonians in the Bible, right? So you got to understand the bloodline connection to see the whole picture, right? Because a lot of us, we get caught up into mythology. We get caught up into the monotheistic context of it, and we forget the history, and the history is connected to certain bloodlines. So when you understand the bloodlines, and then you break down connotative linguistics by way of etymology, when you break all that down, that breaks down the spell. It's a codex, right?
Извините, по-русски звучит грубовато немножко.
Especially as we know, Russia now warning the U.S. against providing any direct military aid to Israel. How significant is that warning, especially coming from Russia in this moment?
Yeah, well, I think the threat from Russia is possible. I think there's a much bigger threat if we were to get involved to Iranian forces directly attacking U.S. forces in the region, or worse, Iranian proxy forces striking U.S. forces. Again, we've got, somewhere between, troops arrayed across 8 to, 15 bases throughout the region. Baghdad, Kuwait, Al-Assad Air Base.
Now, as I was telling you, Iran is strategic allies with Russia and China. Russia and China in the Bible was Gog and Magog, right? We're going to get through that as we break down the biblical context. I'm going to break down the esoteric aspects of it, right? So Iran and China are basically bodyguards for Iran. Russia and China are bodyguards for Russia. Russia and China are bodyguards for Iran. I need you to understand that.
Base in Western Iraq, the UAE, Bahrain. This is why we've ordered the partial evacuation of the embassy in Baghdad and provided resources for withdrawal of U.S. dependence out of Bahrain. They're all within range of Iranian ballistic missiles, and they're all within range of Iranian proxy forces who have been attacking U.S. forces for, probably since 1979, but certainly in our most recent experience since 2003. So we're all well versed in the Iranian playbook in attacking U.S. forces using proxy forces, and that I think is a huge risk to our forces in the region.
I need you to understand something. I told you the World Economic Forum said verbatim that the power grid is going to go down and it can basically be attacked by Iran. So you notice that all this is going on as you have these coronal mass ejections that's hitting the planet, because they don't want you to understand and delineate if this is a coronal mass ejection that's going to shut down the power grid, or is this an electromagnetic pulse deficiency that's going to be facilitated by either China, Russia, or Iran, right? So that's where spiritual discernment comes into play.
That is deeply, deeply concerning, especially because there's been a thought that these proxy groups were perhaps depleted in this moment. But if that is a plan, right, that is deeply concerning. General Robert Abrams, it's always good to talk.
Yeah, that's not happening.
Israel has been bombing Tehran relentlessly. Iran, on the other hand, has fired over 400 missiles at Israel. Israeli air defenses have struggled to stop the incoming missiles. Now Iran has unleashed a new missile, a hypersonic missile. This comes at a time when Israeli Iron Dome has less than 2 weeks of ammo left.
Подземные заводы, они существуют, ничего с ними не произошло. И в этой связи, мне кажется, было бы правильным всем мы вместе поискать пути прекращения боевых действий, потому что уровень доверия достаточно высокий между нашими странами. У нас очень добрые отношения с Ираном. Мы могли бы продолжить эту работу и обеспечить их интересы в этой сфере.
Have you seen the Tucker Carlson Senator Ted Cruz interview? It seems like this issue on whether or not the United States should strike is kind of divided.
I say about 4 or 5 videos ago, I told you that Tucker Carlson is also associated with the Pilgrim Society, that it also associated with the Canaanite bloodline because he's connected to the Druids, right? You got to understand bloodline in order to break down the codex, because all these people are basically in bed with each other because it's all a part of the international apparatus when you're talking about a so-called one world order. They all in bed together.
A lot of your supporters.
No, my supporters are for me. My supporters are America first. They make America great again. My supporters don't want to see Iran have a nuclear weapon. Tucker's a nice guy. He called and apologized the other day because he thought he said things that were a little bit too strong, and I appreciated that. And Ted Cruz is a nice guy. I mean, he's been with me for a long time. I'd say once the race was over, he's been with me ever since, right? But very simple. If they think that it's okay for Iran to have a nuclear weapon, then they should oppose me. But nobody thinks it's okay. People that don't want, I don't want to fight either. I'm not looking to fight. But if it's a choice between fighting and them having a nuclear weapon, you have to do what you have to do.
The war's 6th day has delivered a seismic shock. Iran has fired its Fata 1 hypersonic missile directly at Tel Aviv, marking the first time such a weapon has been used in the conflict.
We extend our congratulations to the devoted commanders and fighters of the IRGC Aerospace Force over the 11th wave of the proud Operation True Promise 3, carried out using first-generation Fata missiles that marks the beginning of the end for the...
I need you to understand something. A lot of these missiles that you see in the air, these are really UFO phenomenon, or UAPs, right? Unidentified objects, right? The reason that is because when you go all the way back to World War II, it was a time where they almost cracked the earth. And they had a meeting with the Galactic Federation when you're talking about these militarized groups that also works in tandem with these, the politicians and things of that nature, right? There's a reason for that. Because like I said, they can only do so much when it comes to these wars before you have these entities that live underground. When you're talking about these interdimensional or outer dimensional entities, sooner or later, they're going to infiltrate. But like I said, they cannot manipulate everything in third density because they can't infringe upon the free will of humanity unless it gets out of hand. I need you to understand that.
So-called legendary air defenses of the Zionist army and the confusion and self-harm among the Zionist thugs.
The Fata 1, developed by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps and unveiled in 2023, is a medium-range hypersonic ballistic missile with a range of 1,400 kilometers. Easily enough to reach any target in Israel from deep within Iranian territory. What makes the Fata 1 so terrifying is...
I know y'all remember back probably about 8 years ago, right? It was a time where a lot of these missiles and these nukes and everything, they were basically getting dismantled by, unknown phenomenon, right? When you're talking about UFOs or whatever. So this is a real thing. You can look that up on Google. You can go on BitChute. You can go on Reddit and go to these forums or whatever that basically demonstrates that analysis.
Its speed and agility. Traveling at up to Mach 15, it can cover the distance to Tel Aviv in mere minutes, while its maneuverable re-entry vehicle allows it to change course mid-flight, evading even the most advanced missile defense systems. But Fata 1 is just the tip of Iran's missile spear. The Islamic Republic's arsenal includes the Emad and Khaybar Shekan medium-range ballistic missiles, both capable of striking Israel with ranges exceeding 1,000 kilometers. While Emad can carry 750 kilograms of munitions, Khaybar Shekan can carry a payload of 600 kilograms. These missiles, combined with the new hypersonic capability, give Iran the power to strike deep and hard, overwhelming Israeli defenses. Israel's air defense network is now under unprecedented strain. Aero interceptors costing $3 million apiece are being fired in huge numbers.
All of these are not missiles. Some of these is UFOs, right? So there's a cosmic war within the international war. Need you to understand that.
In a desperate bid to shield the nation. Intelligence sources warned that at the current rate, Israel's missile stockpiles could be depleted in just 10 to 12 days.
This completely unprovoked attack, no matter what Israel says to the contrary, is a gross violation of the UN Charter and international law. One is left with the impression that Israel's leadership is convinced that they have a completely free hand in the region.
Then there's Moscow's long-standing ties with Israel, dating back to the creation of the modern Israeli state. President Putin has maintained warm relations with Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, who frequently travelled to Russia before the war in Ukraine. Putin has repeatedly demonstrated Russia's readiness to take Israel's interests into account. Now those ties with both Israel and Iran may pay off, placing Russia in the position of a potential power broker, while offering the opportunity to further extend its influence across the region.
Dear citizens of Israel, we are on the 6th day of operation with All My Father. We embarked on this operation to remove two existential threats to the state of Israel: the nuclear threat and the ballistic missile threat. We are progressing step by step in these 10 days. We control the skies of Tehran. We are establishing with tremendous force the regime of the Ayatollahs. We are striking the nuclear, the missiles, the headquarters, the symbols of navigation. And I must tell you that I am speaking with world leaders. There is tremendous admiration for our achievements, for the achievements of our forces, and there is also tremendous admiration for you, the citizens of Israel, for your steadfast spirit, for the strength of your measure. And I want to say, we are enduring a lot of work, painful work, but we see that the home front is strong, the people are steadfast. The state of Israel is stronger than ever, the landing ground of government ministries, to provide assistance to all who are affected. At the same time, the intense fighting continues in the Gaza Strip. We are committed to continuing to achieve both missions, recognizing Hamas and releasing all our hostages, both living and dead. We are not letting up on this. Unfortunately, in recent days, we have also lost heroic fighters. I share the grief of the families. We send our condolences on behalf of the government and the entire people. Hugs. We will continue to do so until we bring everyone together and until Hamas is finally recognized. I would like to thank President Trump, a very great friend of the State of Israel. I thank him for standing by our side. I thank him for the support that the United States is giving us in defending the name of Israel.
I know you remember when Donald Trump, he went to Israel, right? He went to Israel and he was praying on that wall. He's in bed, like I said. He is a deep state agent provocateur that plays both sides because he's a white hat, right? He's a 33rd degree Scottish Rite Freemason. He plays both sides, right? I need you to understand that. He's in bed with Israel too. He's in bed with the deep state, right? Because that means that that the Trump administration in itself, they're giving resources to Israel, right? And he's also giving resources to other entities when you're talking about Russia and Iran and things of that nature. He's working with, both entities.
We are in continuous contact, including our conversation last night, a very warm conversation. And I would like to thank President Trump for the support, citizens of Israel, to get.
Now, with that being said, we're going to get back to the presentation. So, because we're going to pull out them receipts tonight. There's a lot of receipts that, that happened and that I showed you guys in the past that also corresponds with the futuristic timeline that's taking place in real time. So now it says Putin's general calls for mobilization as he declares World War III has already started. We in that time period, ladies and gentlemen. Everything that you see and taking place right now is the beginning of the end, right? So prepare for the ride. Because like I said, sunspot activity has the ability to manipulate human consciousness. The more we speed up in vibration, the more the sun speeds up in vibration. And the more that the sun speeds up in vibration, it activates the dynamos in the epicenter of the planet that creates an influx of plasma. And that plasma gives energy to the planet. And when the energy of the planet harmonizes with the frequencies of nature, those who are not connected to nature, they're going to short circuit. And it's going to cause a lot of neurological misfire. So it's going to keep them connected to a beastly state to where they're going to propagate the energies of war, right? This is why you got to read the book Mastery, and you need to read the book The Art of War. Everything that takes place within those two publications is actually the blueprint and the catalyst to everything that's taking place in real time when you're talking about the rumors of wars, right? Everything operates in cycles. And how they do everything, they operate on both sides of the playing field. Now, I know you remember the song by Outkast called Bombs Over Baghdad, because one thing you got to understand about Baghdad, Baghdad is an energy portal. Because remember back in the early 2000s when we was little kids, some of us was babies, remember during that time period, they were talking about the weapons of mass destruction. The weapons of mass destruction was actually the fact there was a portal in Baghdad, right? It was a portal that was able to take you outside the ice wall. So Baghdad is on the 33rd parallel. And in between, in Baghdad is in between Israel and Iran. Not a coincidence. But guess what's also in alignment with the 33rd parallel? Atlanta. So this is why we're going to Atlanta, to combat the negative frequencies and the energy that is being propagated by these international governments, right? So everything that you see and taking place right now is spiritual, right? Because everything that takes place physical happens in the spiritual realm first. So the cosmic convergence of everything that's taking place on the planet when we go to Stone Mountain on June 28, 2025, it's like I said, this is the embodiment of spiritual warfare. So just the mobilization of those who have that genetic format to harmonize with the sun, we're going to leave an energetic imprint in the ethers in the universe, right? Because one thing you got to understand about Stone Mountain is a positive electrical crystal because it contains of quartz crystal, granite, and feldspar. And it's also the capstone to hollow earth. So everything that you see and taking place right now is the embodiment of prophetic divination, right? So everybody please pull up to Stone Mountain in Atlanta, Georgia on June 6th, June 28th of 2025. This is a very important event because in order to reverse the polarity of the negative frequencies, we all have to come together, right? Because us coming together, it creates orgone energy. Orgone energy has the ability to manipulate the atmosphere and shift the frequency. So like I said, everything that you see and taking place right now is a paradigm shift. So like I said, I know you remember the song by Outkast, Bombs Over Baghdad. Baghdad is in between Israel and Iran. As you can see my cursor right here, right? It's in between. And Baghdad is on the 33rd parallel, just like how Atlanta is on the 33rd parallel. Not a coincidence, right? So this is, like I said, this is the embodiment of spiritual warfare. We fighting back. We fighting back not physically, we fighting back spiritually, right? Because we speak truth to power, right? So now, I know you heard of the Balfour Declaration. The Balfour Declaration that was facilitated in 1917 is basically the embodiment of the blueprint for the Rothschilds, right? Because they also work in tandem with BlackRock. So everything that you see and taking place right now on an international level is being used as a weapon to facilitate these smart cities, right? That is their synthetic form of reconstruction. Now, this is why you got to watch movies like Red Dawn. This is the newer version. This is the older version. So I think on there's two different, militarized groups that goes against the Wolverines in this movie. So I think in this one, they're going against the Russian regime. And on this one, I think they're going against the China regime. So it's basically telling you that we have sleeper cells in the geographical landmass of America right now. And they waiting to be activated. They waiting on that text message. They waiting on that phone call to cause calamity and catastrophe on American soil, right? World War III is going to take place on American soil. So this is why it's not a coincidence that JP Morgan Chase CEO urges the United States to stockpile guns and ammo instead of Bitcoin. I told you, your damn money is not going to mean nothing as we get through the paradigm shift. Money don't mean nothing in the Great Awakening period, right? Because what the hell are you going to do with the money when the grid goes down? You should be getting your knowledge up, getting your ammo up, right? Getting your resources up. Nobody give a damn about no Bitcoin. Nobody give a damn about no bricks and all this other stuff. So like I said, you have to be very, realistic about your approach when it comes to these end time prophecies, right? Because everything that was facilitated by maritime law and these Canaanites only has a temporal power. It doesn't have no type of sustainability on the planet because, like I said, when you have a synthetic people who create a synthetic system, there's no sustainability for it, right? So I'm gonna show you this video for a second. I'm gonna show you this video that actually works in tandem with everything that I'm saying right now. Get those likes up. Hit that subscribe button, ladies and gentlemen. Now, I know you remember this video. Like I said, I keep them receipts, baby, because the receipts is going to receipt. Now, remember this guy. He said, you're going to know who I am. This was back in 2023, right? When the borders had opened up due to the fact that you had the deep state Democrats with Kamala and Joe Biden and things of that nature. They opened up the borders. And the reason they opened up the borders is because they know that this is where the sleeper cells is able to infiltrate and be able to merge themselves with, United States citizens, basically. I'm going to play the video.
Really not smart enough to know who I am. But soon you're going to know who I am. Very.
Like you said, he said, soon you're going to know who I am. Why is that? That's because he is a sleeper cell from the Middle East. No civilization can be conquered until it's facilitated by the inside. Everything operates from an inside job. Just like when you're talking about the Twin Towers and things of that nature, it was an inside job. So this next so-called 9/11 event is going to be an inside job. That's why you got to watch the cartoon series on Netflix called Inside Job. So like I said, you read the book Mastery, you read the book The Art of War, they tell you how everything as far as like the fall of civilization is always an inside job. The deep state Democrats are the ones who let these people from the Middle East in, right? But they showing you in real time on television, they try to make it seem like Israel is going against everybody in the Middle East. So if the borders was opened up by the deep state Democrats, why would you let the borders open for your enemy? That's what, like I said, they're working in tandem. They in bed together, right? Because it's all about an international ploy to facilitate this new world order system, right? All you seeing is basically cosplay. They all work together. I need you to understand that. This is not the time for you to be so-called picking sides. Follow the path of the middle way to where you're able to dematerialize the illusion, right? A lot of y'all are going to get tricked by way of semantics because you picking a side. Stop picking sides and follow your own path, the path of Malakut, right? To where you become a seer, right? So now I'm going to play the video again.
Really not smart enough to know who I am. But soon you're going to know who I am. Very.
Soon you're going to know who I am, right? So that's very critical because this also works in conjunction with a screenshot that I put out about the new Indiana Jones movie. I'm going to show you because there's a date that's very significant about everything that's taking place right now. Now, I'm going to pull up this date for you. Now, It shows you right here on Indiana Jones. I took this screenshot. It shows you the date of June 24th, 2025, right? Why would they put that date right there? What is that basically alluding to? Is this some type of esoteric metaphysical codex, right? Is something going to happen on this date? Who knows? So be very critical about everything that's going on, because we definitely have sleeper cells in America right now that's ready to be activated to cause turmoil and catastrophe on American soil. Now, it says in Jeremiah 48:8, Gog, fallen angels, great army, then the red Kachina coming for the purification period of America, right? So everything that you're seeing taking place right now is the embodiment of prophecy. The red star Kachina is when the sun is able to transmute the energies of these coronal mass ejections. So Gog and Magog is Russia and China armies of the fallen angels, the great spiritual army, the red Kachina, as you have the magnetic pole shift. And the spoiler shall come upon every city, and no city shall escape. The valley also shall perish, and the plain shall be destroyed. As Thoth, who is Tahuti, who is Enki, who is Melchizedek, the true Lord of the Bible, have spoken, which is the frequency of truth, because the only words from the heart can reach the heart, because that operates by way of the Sufi order of the sons of green light. The green light works in tandem with the heart chakra. So like I said, the tongue is esoterically connected to the heart. So you become Melchizedek when you speak truth to power, because that's how you square the circle. The more you speak truth and you amalgamate it with the neutrinos that's coming in, it manipulates this Metatronic overlay, this dualistic simulation that we basically living in, right? So now we go here, the money will fall and be destroyed. Genesis chapter 47, verse 15, right? It says, and when the money fell in the land of Egypt, which is America, right? During the time of 2025 to 2026, in the land of Canaan, which is also facilitated by DC, Tyrus, NYC, and other places. All Egyptians, who was also known as Americans, unto Joseph said, give us bread, right? And why should we die in thy presence for the money, which will basically be destroyed? Like I said, stop putting all your motherfucking eggs in one basket. I told you, stop worrying about cryptocurrency, right? That's part of the tricknology. Because if you have a veneration for money so much, you're going to conform to the system when the system crashes. And then when they go through this process of reconstruction, you're going to get the damn chip because you believe in money so much, right? Because I keep telling y'all, everything on this planet has a supplication process because it operates with your emotions. You have an emotional connection to the money. So this is why you're talking about cryptocurrency, right? So now, as we get to the other side of the publication, you go to the sealed portion of the final testament of the so-called Jesus Christ, chapter 88, right? Which is also known as the dualistic keys of papacy. And now this destruction of the United States of America, which is the seat of the beast in the latter days, in between the years of 2025 and 2026. So this is the esoteric codex of the biblical prophecy that's connected to the so-called Bible. The Bible is a Freemasonic playbook, and this earth, right, shall be greatly affected, the economy of the beast throughout the world. And once the economy of the earth have failed miserably, or once the waters of the great river Euphrates have dried up, like I said, that's basically the embodiment of the end of maritime law, which is water law, right? This is why you have so-called liquid cash. You got to understand connotative linguistics in order to understand the language that they propagate in the media, right? And how it works in conjunction with biblical context. Because the Bible is basically their blueprint. So they have, that they have no longer give life to the great city of Babylon. Then the world be prepared for the second coming of the Lord, who is Melchizedek, who is the convergence of the 144,000s, the ones who have the ability to be a demon slayer by speaking truth. Prepare for the second coming of the Lord, and the people of the world shall be also prepared to receive the word of God, which shall proceed forth from his mouth, right? Because like I said, only words from the heart can reach the heart, right? Spiritual warfare, because the heart in itself is 100,000 times more highly magnetic than the brain. You got to understand that, right? That's when you get into neurocardiology. So the 7-year Passover east wind of famine, Genesis chapter 41:27. And the seventh then ill-favored kind that came up after the 7 years. So this is basically the embodiment of the seven thunders, right? Because once the seven thunders is activated, this is where you have famine. Because one thing you got to understand about everything that's taking place on the planet is that nature is also fighting back. This is also a spiritual war and a war of nature, because you got the Pacific Ocean, the Atlantic Ocean is comprised of a lot of coral reef farms, but 85% of the coral reef farms is being eaten up by these starfish. And the reason that is because, like I said, nature is fighting back, because the coral reefs is tether connected to the atmosphere, right? So if you have all the coral reefs gone, that's going to mess up the ecological system and the ecosystem of planet Earth, to where you're going to have a so-called climate change. So the sun is going to speed up in vibration because, like I said, nature is fighting back. The 7 empty ears blasted, right? What the east wind shall be, the 7 years of famine. So, like I said, if the ecological system of the oceans is being manipulated, it's going to mess up the distribution process of importing and exporting food and goods and things of that nature. It's going to put a stoppage on the corporate system that was facilitated by the deep state Democrats. So, like I said, it can be the embodiment of World War, Civil War, Fallen Angels War, Magnetic Pole Shift, and the Red Star Kachina. Now, the United States is the most wicked nation on the planet. Seal Portion, chapter 90. And now I have seen the lighter days in between the years of 2025 and 2027. Because, like I said, 2027 is so-called the end of the world, which is also the end of an age, the clay age, that was facilitated by mankind, who was the kind of a man who was also known as the Canaanite, Yakubs Creation. So this is why their system is basically falling. It's the end of the system. I need y'all to understand that, right? So in the latter days of the United States, which is the most wicked nation upon the earth, in regards to those who seek to enslave the souls of the children, who was also known as your so-called indigenous people, the United States eagle of the men that they might get gain and not be required to work by the sweat of their own brow, right? Now, this is where we get into Revelation 16:10. And the fifth angel poured out his veil upon the seat of the beast, right? Who is the beast? The beast is comprised of these European Union nations, right? Dr. York, he pointed that out in the Leviathan publication. So the seat of the beast in his kingdom was full of darkness, and they gone their tongues for pain, right? The sealed portion, chapter 88, final statement. So it says right here verbatim, and now this destruction of the United States of America, which is the seat of the beast in the latter days, and this destruction shall come to pass in the same manner as the destruction of the Roman Empire, which came to pass because of the wickedness of the citizens, right? Sealed portions, chapter 98. And the seed of Satan shall be glorified in the latter days above all other nations of the world. And from this throne shall Satan rule the world and cause all to bow down before him and worship him, right? So, like I said, this is all the embodiment of, the American corporation, because, like I said, they're going to create this synthetic so-called antichrist to create, some type of revitalization for America. Because, like I said, the system is over. The corporate infrastructure of America is over, right? The 6,000 years is up. Put that in the chat again. The 6,000 years is up. Okay. Now, Now, all this turmoil and all this, everything that's taking place within the government apparatus, civil unrest, civil war, border closures, and famine in America. Whoa. Hold on. I'm going to play a video for you guys for a second. I got a video that coincides with this. Now, let me see. Okay, here we go. Yeah, here we go. So like I said, if you're new to the channel, hit that like button, hit that subscribe button, and hit that notification bell. Share this video. It's very important. It's very critical about everything that's taking place within the infrastructure that's taking place in America in real time.
Role in the Middle East again, does Israel play in this?
Israel was created as the instrument to bring about the Battle of Armageddon and the fulfillment of prophecy, a war that will be so terrible, where nuclear weapons will be used, so that the American citizens and the other people in the world will get down on their knees and beg for no more war. And what is the answer to that? They're going to be told the only way we can guarantee no more war is if we destroy the sovereignty of nations and we come together as one humanity in a one world government.
Right.
And I have to understand something. That guy, he was also unalive for putting out the publication, Behold a Pale Horse. Now, 2026 is also the year of the horse, who was also the white horse of Revelation, which is the harbinger of destruction, right? The harbinger of the facilitation in the end process of the end of the 6,000-year purification period that was facilitated by the Canaanite that was connected to Israel. So he also talks about 9/11 in his publication years before he even came out. He talks about the naval intelligence and UFO phenomenon. He talks about all of it in Behold a Pale Horse. So, and you got to understand that book was rewritten and edited, probably about maybe 100 times. Need you to understand that because they're trying to cloak the truth, because the truth is coming out. The more the sun speeds up in vibration, the more the truth is going to come out, right?
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003. The IC continues to monitor closely if Tehran decides to reauthorize its nuclear weapons program.
But how close do you personally think that they were to getting one? Because Tulsi Gabbard testified in March that the intelligence community said Iran wasn't building a nuclear weapon.
I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having it.
As we saw there, Netanyahu has been fixated with Iran's nuclear program for decades now. Will the U.S. finally give him what he wants?
It seems it is. Just judging from the movements of the American president and the various reports the past 24 hours, clearly Trump is up to something when he talks about unconditional surrender. But this is not just Netanyahu. Just for the record, since you've had this excellent package, it's good to recall that the United States started warning about Iranian nuclear weapon back in 1981. That's before Netanyahu entered into politics. And it had repeated that for the past 40 years as well. It seemed like the Americans and Netanyahu have been echoing one another about an Iranian threat. And the question is why? Why do they do that?
Notice you see the number 33 at the bottom. Everything is a Freemasonic playbook. This is a Freemasonic playbook. They're telling you in real time. They're telling you by way of numerical sequence. They're telling you by way of the codex of the language. But you got to understand the symbolism in order to telegraph everything that's going to be taking place in the future.
Because mission accomplished in Iraq was done several months after the war started. But it was not mission accomplished. That's the problem here, is that you can even occupy Tehran as Bush occupied Baghdad. But then what? Then 20 years of tormenting the Iraqis, and the Iraqis tormenting the Americans, costing them more than $3 trillion. Look at Pakistan, look at Afghanistan. They occupied it in a matter of hours. They kicked out the Taliban. For 20 years, they have gone on in that war, and they got humiliated. The same could happen in Iran.
So, which brings me to this question then. What is the only way, if there is a way, that Israel and the U.S. can defeat Iran today?
they can defeat Iran. But then what? This is the problem, right? These are all Pyrrhic victories. Victories are concepts for, narrow-minded politicians and poets. There is no victory because they've tried it for so many years. Didn't they start with regime change in Iran back in 1953, 70 years ago? And what's the result? Didn't they do the same once and again? How many wars were fought by Israel and the United States in the Middle East? And each time they declare victory, they declare defeat. No one is defeated because this cycle of wars and violence in the Middle East cannot be won by airplanes.
I spoke with Major B, an Israeli fighter pilot who is on the front lines of this war. Take a listen. Can you talk about those dangers? Were there any efforts to shoot down Israeli jets? What does Iranian air defense look like?
So when you ask about attempts, I will say that it's pretty obvious that the Iranian regime doesn't like the Israeli fighter jets flying over their skies, and they do have they have advanced their technologies on their side in the past years as well as we have. And we've been practicing and training for this type of scenario. So what we have done in the first 24 hours is create that environment so that whichever surface-to-air threat we would face, we'd be able to make sure that our side wins.
We don't want Iran to acquire nuclear weapons or ballistic capabilities. But I think the biggest mistake we can make today is to use military means to bring about regime change in Iran, because that would mean chaos.
Well before sunrise, President Trump returned to Washington to be in place as commander-in-chief as Israel and Iran launch a new round of attacks.
They call them commander-in-chief. Like I said, pay attention to the words. Pay attention to what they say. This is all the codex.
Evaluations and decisions to make. We know he does not want a wider war. The number one goal here is to contain Iran.
Israel and Iran are on their 5th day of fighting, and Israeli officials believe their strikes have significantly set back Iran's nuclear program.
We've taken out their main enrichment facility at Natanz. We've taken out their conversion facility in Isfahan. We're on the road to victory, and we're deeply grateful for President Trump's support of what we are doing.
Right now, the U.S. is not involved offensively in the conflict, but the Pentagon says U.S. forces are standing by. The president says he's not interested in a ceasefire and has his sights set on something bigger.
An end, a real end, not a ceasefire, an end.
For American troops to get involved, President Trump would need approval from Congress, but even Republicans are split on U.S. intervention.
Well, I think Iran is in a really tough spot here, entirely of their own making. They're not used to having a president who doesn't try to bribe them with stuff like Obama did or kowtow to them and give them freebies like Biden did. They've got a president here who puts America first, who's going to do what's in America's best interests. And I think Trump's been really clear. Iran's not going to get a nuke. So they can either come to the table and surrender their nuclear program freely, peaceably, as Trump is offering, or they can face Israel on their own.
Do you think there's a danger of not allowing Israel to finish the job? This will be all for naught unless they can get rid of the entire nuclear program? That includes Fordo?
I think that President Trump, I trust him on this. I think he has handled this situation very, very deftly. And my view is that he's going to continue to put America's security interests first. He's given Israel a lot of space to protect themselves, which is what they're doing, to put their security interests, make sure that Israel sees to its own security interests. I think that's entirely appropriate. And I think the president here is continuing to be consistent, saying Iran's not getting a nuke. And if Iran wants to come to the table and surrender their nuclear program, the United States is here to help that. Otherwise, Iran is not going to get any cover from the United States. We're not going to bail them out of this. We're not going to protect them like previous American presidents, frankly, have done.
Are we going to see the Iraq playbook, you think, being applied to Iran?
There's absolutely no doubt about that. If I had any doubt, I could then just add up the 4 or 5 elements that built up in a manufactured way by the Bush administration. One, that the nuclear threat was imminent, that a yellow mushroom cloud would be approaching America if America didn't act first. That Saddam was going to give those nuclear weapons to Al-Qaeda. And now Netanyahu says that Iran was going to give them to the Houthis. And that
being said, that's the rest of that video. So now we're going to get back to the presentation at hand, right? We're going to get right back to the presentation. So everything that you're seeing taking place right now that coincides with the video that I just showed you guys coincides with Genesis chapter 47, verse 15, right? So it tells you about, the money will fail. Everything as far as like the global empire and the global infrastructure of the corporate system that was facilitated by the Canaanites, who was also acclimated to the Edomite bloodline. Because when you look at the United States Corporation as when you're looking at the USA, which is the epitome of the European Union, it's really an anagram for Esau, which is the United States Corporation Economics, right? So now it says, and when money failed in the land of Egypt, in the land of Canaan, all the Egyptians, the Americans, came unto Joseph and said, give us bread for while we die in thy presence, for the money faileth. So like I said, money doesn't mean nothing in the next paradigm shift. Money doesn't mean nothing. So when you go to the sealed portion, chapter 88, it tells you that this is the destruction of the United States of America, which is the seed of the beast in the latter days from 2025 to 2026 and 27. It says that earth, which is equated to Egypt, which is America, that is disconnected from the Assyrian Empire, which is Babylon, because it was facilitated by way of, imperialism and colonization by the Canaanite, and shall affect greatly the economy of the beast throughout the world. And once the economy of the earth have failed miserably, or once the waters of the great river of Euphrates dries up, like I said, water law has to dry up, because that's why we have the liquid assets when it comes to economics and monetary systems. All right. Like I said, if you're new to the channel, hit that like button, hit that share button, hit that subscribe button, and then put, like I said, put 6,000. The 6,000 years is up in the chat. Put the 6,000 years is up. So it tells you right here in Genesis chapter 41, verse 27, in the seventh end. When you talk, anytime that you see 7 in the Bible, that is equated to the 7 thunders that, that is propagated by Dr. Malachi Z. York, that also works in tandem with the Hopi prophecy, right? So in the 7th end, an ill favored kind that came up after them 7 years, the 7 empty ears blasted, right? Which is basically the personification of the trumpets, which is why you have Trump in office, right? So it's one of those things where, just based off the video, it could be an influx of things, because you got the ICE and the Mexicans and all this other stuff going on. So it can create a civil war, fallen angels war, magnetic pole shift, a war, and the Red Star Kachina, right? When you have the intensity of the great destroyer giving an influx of energy to our, simulated sun, basically. So that's, like I said, it's one of those things that can create civil unrest amongst the borders, all types of things, because conflict and turmoil is the precursor to the fall of the corporation. And so it has to fall. It has to fall. And it's inevitable that it has to fall. And the reason that is because, like I said, anytime that you build a system that's designated for synthetic people is designated to fall. It's inevitable. So Isaiah chapter 49, verse 26, folk will feed those oppress Israel and Jacob their own flesh, and I will feed them that oppress thee with their own. When he's talking about, many different forms of pestilence, right? Because we're going to have another shutdown. The first one, that was just the first phase. So you got to get ready for the next one. And with their own blood, as with sweet wine and flesh, shall know that the Lord that I am, which is talking about Thoth, because Thoth is actually the true Lord of the Bible. And then when you go to Zechariah chapter 11, verse 9, which is the anagram, a mirror flip for 9/11, Thoth will feed those who oppressed Israel and Jacob their own flesh. Same thing. So then said I will not feed you. That dieth, let it die. And that is cut off, let it be. Cut off and let the rest eat every one the flesh. Hold on. One, the flesh of another. So like I said, it's going to be one of those things where you're going to have another form of pestilence. It's going to be a so-called flesh form of pestilence. They just came out, with a publication talking about there's a new STD that basically eats the skin from the inside out. So it's basically acidic. So it's one of those things where this can put you in a state of zombification. Now, this is where we get into the big head scientist aspect of it. I need everybody in the chat put the 6,000 years is up. It's up, right? So now we're going to be breaking down how this corresponds with the prophecy of Yakub in the end of the 6,000 year verification period, right? But first, before we tackle this topic, you have to understand who is the cursed seed of the Canaanites, right? Who is also known as the Khazarians. So I'm going to show you this video that's going to give you a brief synopsis of the history that is acclimated to the presentation. So I'm going to get this video going for you guys. And sorry, I had to, leave the video for a second. I had to get my hair cut. You know what I'm saying? I had to get the hair cut. So that's why if you see the video, it's kind of choppy, or it kind of like glitched off a little bit. I went to go get a haircut and I came back to finish the rest of the video. So now, this is what we're going to get into. Who are the Khazars? The Khazars are the ones who live in that landmass of what we call, Israel, right? The so-called Holy Land. But we all know that the Holy Land is in America because it was tether connected to the land of Mu and Lemuria and Atlantis, right? So it's not a coincidence that Atlanta is on the 33rd parallel, because 33 is equated to the embodiment of the frequency of Atlantis, right? So now I'm going to show you this video.
What happened? The Eastern European...
You don't understand what's going on as far as you can't figure out what he's saying. There's captions here at the top. So pay very close attention to everything that he's saying and pay attention to this geographical landmass, right? Khazaria, right?
What happened? The Eastern European Jews, who form 92% of the world's population, of those people who call themselves Jews, were originally Khazars. They were a warlike tribe that lived deep in the heart of Asia.
Now, that's important to know, because one thing you got to understand is that Europe is not really a continent, because Europe is on the western peninsula of Asia, right? So there's a reason why it's called the Caucasus Mountains, or Caucasian. What is a Cauc? A Cauc is a caucus, something that is basically genetically dead. Asia, Caucasian, a genetically dead Asian. That's what that basically embodies. So the great majority of the Khazars, so one thing you got to understand, every so-called European on the planet is not connected to the bloodline of the Khazarian Mafia. The Khazarian Mafia is comprised of the 13 bloodlines of the so-called Illuminati that was genetically spliced by the big head scientists of Yakub. So just because you see, other Europeans or whatever, no, some of them don't have the genetic format to harmonize with the energies of the sun, because due to the interbreeding and the intermixing and colonization or whatever, it messed up a lot of antigens when it talks about, certain bloodline connections. So every so-called European that you see, or a so-called white person, all of them are not Khazars, right? The cursed seed of the Bible is actually the Khazars. So I know there's a lot of, propagation as far as when it comes to bloodlines, when it comes to race and all this other stuff. Just because you're a so-called white person or whatever, that doesn't mean that you're connected to this bloodline. You are not the same as those people who is propagating the the separatism and the degradation to, Western civilization. You don't belong to those people, but they tricked you into going against us. That's the thing, right? Because you fell for the semantics and the tricknology. You fell for the semantics and the tricknology because it caters to you because of your skin complexion. Just because you look like these people don't mean that they really fuck with you, right? Some of you come from, the factions of the Pleiadians. You come from the Taros who live in these interdimensional portals. When you're talking about the city of Shambhala, which is the synth of Allah, and Argartha, right? And Rainbow City inside Hollow Earth. Some of you come from that faction. Some of you come from the Daros, who is also known as the detrimental robotoids, right? Who have a negative frequency to them, right? So it's one of those things where you have to, delineate. You have to delineate because, like I said, everybody is not connected to the Khazarian Mafia bloodline. You have black Khazarians, because I already broke that down when you're talking about the blacks in the Caucasus Mountains. The first Canaanite was actually black, right? So this is when you get into microbiology and genealogy. The first Canaanite was black, and the blacks in the Caucasus Mountain were the Colochians. So the Colochians are basically the predecessors of the Khazarians, right? The cursed seed. So just like you have a dualistic energy of a negative faction of so-called blacks and a positive faction of so-called blacks, you have a positive faction of so-called whites, you have a negative faction of so-called whites. And the negative faction of the European is the Khazars. And the negative faction of the so-called black people are the Khazars, who is actually the black nobility, right? That's what you must understand. So you got to read between the lines and understand bloodline connections and how colonization took place. So I'm going to play this video. I'm gonna play it all the way back.
What happened? The Eastern European Jews, who form 92% of the world population of those people who call themselves Jews, were originally Khazars. They were a warlike tribe that lived deep in the heart of Asia. And they were so warlike that even the Asiatics drove them out of Asia into Eastern Europe.
Yes, because like I said, they were vagabonds. They were nomads, right? They don't really have a homeland. That's why when they went to, the ancient Kemet, they got kicked out and walked across the burning sand. So this is why they do the ritual in Freemasonry, where you got to put the blindfold over your eyes, put the pants leg up, because it denotes the fact that you're a vagabond. And then you put the cable and toe around your neck, which is basically the embodiment of the modern day tie. Because when you wear a suit, that's Freemasonic, right? So it's one of those things where the ritualistic aspects of it comes from the fact that they was getting kicked out of different land masses because they was uncivilized, right? They was operating under Canaanite rituals, which is cannibal. They was eating flesh, walking around naked. This is why they have to wear the apron in Freemasonry. This is why they stop at 33 degrees in Freemasonry, because they don't have enough G-force to raise up the Kundalini energy because they have too much sulfur in their genetics, right? Sulfur blocks the transmission on how the Kundalini energy is able to reach the pineal gland. It blocks that frequency.
And to reduce this so you don't get too confused about the history of Eastern Europe, they set up this big Khazar kingdom, 800,000 square miles. Only there was no Russia, there were no other countries, and the Khazar kingdom was the biggest country in all Europe. So big and so powerful that when the other monarchs wanted to go to war, the Khazars would loan them 40,000 soldiers. That's how big and powerful they were. Now, they were phallic worshippers.
One thing you got to understand, see, the multitude of those Khazars, like I said, they were black first, right? These is what we call the sellout blackamoors, the ones who came over here and created religious papacy through the doctrine of discovery, right? And how they broke over 370 treaties in history, right? By taking us out of our sovereign capacity, came over here with the religion, right? Propagating the black Christian codes and things of that nature. by way of the Inquisition.
Now, they were phallic worshippers, which is filthy. I don't want to go into the details of that now. It was their religion, the way it was the religion of many other pagans or barbarians elsewhere in the world. Now, the king became so disgusted with the degeneracy of his kingdom.
Like I said, you know why he became disgusted with the degeneracy? The reason that is because Canaanite culture is democratic culture, and democratic culture is demonic rulership, because they had the veneration of Canaanites. Canaanite culture is the veneration of Moloch, who was actually Baal, who was Enlil, who was also Shaitan, or Yahweh, or Yardabal, or Yakub. So the degeneracy aspect comes from it when you're talking about all these hedonistic practices, all these sexual proclivities and things of that nature. All that started with Canaanite culture, who is also connected to the Khazar, right? When you're talking about the Edomite, the Girgashite, all these bloodlines is connected to the Khazar. It's the same bloodline. And if you notice this whole geographical landmass, they're all in connection. Even parts of the people that's a part of Russia, they're Khazars too, right? It's one big club, it's one big bloodline. So they giving you semantics and tricknology, try to make it seem like they're going against each other in the media. They're all one bloodline, it's the same bloodline.
That he decided to adopt a so-called monotheistic faith, either Christianity, Islam, the Muslim faith.
See, like I said, it doesn't matter what religious system that you follow, because it's all Canaanite worship. Christianity, Islam, Judaism, whatever you follow, is still connected to the veneration of Canaanite culture, right? Because that means that you boxed yourself in mentally. Keep playing the video.
Or what is known today as Judaism, really Talmudism. So, like spinning a top, he said, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, and he picked out so-called Judaism. And that became the state religion, and he sent down to the Talmudic schools of Tel Aviv and Surah, and brought up thousands of these rabbis with their teachings, and he opened up synagogues and schools in his kingdom of 800,000 people, 800,000 square miles, and maybe 10 to 20 million people, and they became what we call Jews. There wasn't one of them that ever had an ancestor that ever put a toe in the Holy Land, not alone in Old Testament history. But
like I said, they don't have a Holy Land. They're not connected to no landmass. Everything they did was operated by way of colonization. They don't have a homeland. That's because they don't belong on this planet. That's why I said, Yakub, he said, I will create a people that will rule over you for 6,000 years. These are the people, right? So now we're going to get back to the presentation at hand. All right. Now we're going to pull this right back up. So these are the people, right? Every European that you see and every so-called white person that you see is not connected to the Khazarian Canaanite bloodline. That's a fact, right? So Yakub, you know what I'm saying, making concoctions for genetic hybridization. So this is why I said, as far as the 6,000 years being up, you got to understand the significance of the zodiac signs, right? Because when you're talking about we're going through the shift, what does that even mean? This is what we're talking about, the processional circle at the top. So when you're looking at my cursor right here, it shows you that the ruling star system at that point of time, when it was in the age of Pisces, was Alpha Draconis. Then it transmuted and shifted right here to the North Star Polaris as we get back to the galactic center, which is basically the embodiment of the Milky Way star constellation. If you notice, you see the star Polaris is in alignment with the age of Aquarius, right? That is what we're talking about, the shift. So when you go through these 6,000 year increments from the sun cycle, lunar cycle, back to the sun cycle The sun cycle is being facilitated by the Aquarian age that's in alignment with the star Polaris, which is the fifth dimensional sun. That is the sun that's going to give you the electromagnetic radiation to raise up your frequency. It's going to contain a different G-force. And that G-force in itself is going to leave an energetic imprint on the universe to the point where you're able to harmonize with the energies of nature. So the Alpha Draconis star system was under the lunar cycle, under the age of Pisces, Aries, and Taurus, which is the clay age. The clay age was for the Canaanite. That was the last 6,000 years. That's why I said the 6,000 years is up, because now we're going back to the galactic center where the star Polaris is at, which is the Aquarian age, and that's going to give an electrical coherence to the transmission of planet Earth that activates the magnetic field that causes a spike in the Schumann resonance. That is basically the Sufi order of the sons of green light, because the Schumann resonance spike, when it harmonizes with the energies of the magnetic field, it creates the gamma radiation of the aurora borealis, right? So now, like I said, we got many different, solar flares that's coming to the planet, because one thing you got to understand is that the sun is going to expose everything in existence. The sun is going to expose everything that was acclimated to the old world. The old world was the age of Pisces under the lunar cycle. That's why we have the strawberry moon, because the strawberry moon was the embodiment of the harbinger of destruction of the corporation. Their time is running out. So this is where the great solar flash is going to come into play, right? So this is why it's imperative to understand that, artificial intelligence and many different forms of nanotechnology doesn't harmonize with the energies of the sun, because the great solar flash is going to dematerialize the great majority of that nanotechnology that you have all throughout your physiology. It's going to make you short circuit, neurological misfires, right? It's kind of like the same thing when we had the last shutdown, because a lot of people, they were sick not because of the draconian juice and what was going on. There wasn't no type of pestilence on the planet. The only reason people was getting sick because their genetic format wasn't harmonizing with the sun. There's a reason why they called it a coronal, right? That's a coronal mass ejection, because that coronal mass ejection in itself is a sun frequency. If you notice, they was naming the draconian juice after many different, sun frequencies, like the delta. That's a frequency. So people was getting sick because they was vibrating too low, not because something came from China. That's a damn lie. So the same thing is going to be taking place all the way up into the year of 2030. So they want to create, the technocratic sorcery, the sustainable development goals. So like I said, if you get that technology inside your body, what you think is going to happen when the grid goes down? What you think is going to happen when you got these energies from the sun that's coming down? It's going to cut off your mitochondrial DNA, right? It's going to cut off your mitochondria, because that denotes the fact that your proprioception is not connected to the circadian rhythm of planet Earth. Now, this is why, like I said, just about, the great majority, a lot of people, as far as like, certain demographics who don't have the non-ether, they're falling victim to the sun, because at the end of the day, it all comes down to that one celestial body. It's the sun. Are you able to harmonize with it? Are you able to vibrate with it? Are you able to be in rhythm with nature and harmonize with the frequencies of the transmission that's coming from the sun? Because like I said, if you're not harmonizing with nature, nature is going to fuck your ass up. So that's why it's imperative to understand that the fertility rate in Europe is basically declining. Why? Because you understand that the UV radiation light spectrum can overexpose and increase the oxidative stress that leads to cellular damage, which leads to the dematerialization of eggs and sperms, right? So the sun has the ability to shut down your ability to procreate, because you got to understand the UV radiation light spectrum has the ability to cause a disruptor in the endocrine system. The endocrine system is what helps balance out your chakra system. So if your chakra system is out of balance, that means that you have a parasitical energy, and it's not going to read with Mother Tiamat. Mother Tiamat is going to categorize you as a parasitical entity, and it's going to stop you from procreating. It's going to stop you from being able to extend your bloodline on this planet, especially if you're a synthetic hybrid. So the environmental endocrine disruptors, excessive heat can increase ozone pollutant exposure, which can have an endocrine disruptant in your genetic format and cause, have a lot of fertility problems. Some researchers explore that whether climate change and increased temperatures from solar radiation might be linked to low sperm counts and things of that nature. So that's why I said, at the end of the day, it's all about genetical self-preservation. Do you have the genetics to harmonize with nature? Do you have the genetics to extend your bloodline in the hereafter? So this is why they're coming out with the movie, 28 days later, right? And this is the older version, but they're coming out with a new one this weekend. So you definitely should see that, because the great majority of the movie takes place in Europe. So a lot of the pestilence, a lot of the fertility rates is going to be extrapolated by the energies of the sun. That's going to put people in a state of zombification, because like I said, your mitochondrial DNA is being cut off because you're not natural to the planet. Now, you do have, so-called whites and Europeans in America and Dravidians or whatever. Some of them, they have a bloodline connection to the Khazarians, but not all of them do. So that's why you see people like this guy, you're going to short circuit when you're not able to harmonize with the energies of nature. And just because you have neuromelanin doesn't mean that your ass is safe either, because a lot of you have a westernized European mindset. You have a westernized European dietary system. So that means that the G-force in the electromagnetic radiation is not going to harmonize with your ass either, because mentally, physically, and spiritually, you just like the Canaanite, right? You just like the cursed seed. When you're talking about the book of Leviticus and when you go to the book of Numbers, these are all law books. The reason they are law books because these are the ones that have the cursed genetics. We created the 10 commandments for them. It ain't for us. We was operate under the frequencies, under the 42 laws of Ma'at. So now they just came out with this publication, said that black fungus that eats up gamma radiation. Now, you got to understand about something about fungus. Carbon is the building block of all civilization. Carbon has an etheric energy that harmonizes with gamma radiation. So gamma radiation is one of those things, is going to transmute the genetic format of the carbon body to where they're able to transform into a god. That is what you call the alchemical aspects of the magnum opus, which is basically Apophis, where man becomes God in the Aquarian age, after you have the moonfall, because the moon is what created the westernized construct that basically subjugated those who are indigenous to America. So it ain't about, the system and the corporation, failing off or whatever. It's really about us upgrading. And once we upgrade, we're going to get our shit back. So it tells you right here, it performs radio synthesis using melanin to absorb radiation and convert it into energy. We're doing the same thing right now when you have the spike in the Schumann resonance, right? When you have that great solar flash and you got these energies from the sun coming down to the planet, it's going to harmonize with your genetic format, right? It's going to harmonize with those energies. So using melanin to absorb radiation and convert it into energy, much less like plants use sunlight, which is photosynthesis. So this is why in the end times, we have to operate from a place of ultrafast internal conversion, meaning that you have to eat through the solar panels of your skin, because that's where you get your vitamins from. Why do they call it vitamin? Vitamin is basically equated to vitality Amen Ra, right? Vitamin means vitality Amen Ra. Ra is the sun. So that means that it creates many different forms of melanocytes, which is in an intelligence molecule, meaning that your ass ain't going to have to eat no food, because like I said, you're going to be able to activate the neuroendocrine transducer, which basically transduces the carbon body into a crystalline state. Because once you crystallize, that's when you convert the melanin and radiation and gamma radiation into energy, just like a plant, which is why the plants are green. Because if you understand about anything about gamma radiation, when you're talking about the Hulk, his genetic format, he was green. Just like Osiris in ancient Kemet, he was green. That's gamma radiation. That is the Sufi order of the sons of green light. That green light denotes the fact that you activated your melanin to where you're able to have, multi-dimensional and interdimensional travel to where you can go inside Hollow Earth. Now, this is where it gets into the fact that it's basically the epitome of the royal arc. The royal arc is basically the embodiment of the both hemispheres of the left brain and the right brain. Because like I told y'all before, you cannot be holy until you become a whole brain thinker. So when you look at the royal arc, it is basically comprised of the vernal equinox and the autumn equinox and the summer solstice. That is basically the blueprint of wisdom, strength, and beauty, which is Gomer Oz the Bar, which is basically the epitome of God. So now we're going back into the strength aspects of the cosmology. So the strength denotes the fact that you're able to harmonize with the sun, and that transmission in itself is denoted in the fact that when you go to Genesis chapter 32, verse 30, it says that Jacob encounters God and names the place pineal because pineal is equated to the pineal gland, which is connected to the pituitary gland, which is the sphenoid bone, right? When you're talking about the Ark of the Covenant. The Ark of the Covenant ain't no damn machine or some type of device. It's just already inside you. That's where you become a god. So this is where in Sumerian mythology, they call that glow Melamu. Melamu denotes the fact that you have a divine radiance, a certain aura. An aura is a protection that makes you harmonize with the energies of the sun during the time of the summer solstice. So this is why they doing all the chemtrails to block out the frequencies of the sun, because the sun rays penetrates the pineal gland through our eyesight. So to direct angels or angels of light, because as I was telling you before, on Noah's Ark, the Ark is actually angels of light. Because when you break down the etymology of the word Noah in ancient Proto-Semitic language, Noah means mind. That mind is the royal arc, to where it gets the transmission in the sun rays that penetrates the pineal gland that is connected to Genesis 32:30. Now, the sun is slowly changing its color due to the solar flares and how it's able to be responsible for raising our consciousness through its light. That's exactly why they are trying to block the sun and the sun rays, and why Donald Trump wants to put that golden dome over the planet. So that's what makes you a god. It's kind of like the movie in the movie Last Dragon. He did not become a god until he stopped looking for God outside of himself. Because once you stop looking for God outside of yourself, that's when you become a god. That's when you start to get your glow. That's when you have that divine radiance, right? That's what makes you chosen. How you gonna say you chosen and you worshiping shit outside of yourself? You going to church and you going to the mosque and all these other things. So now, like I said, the sun is exposing everything. So it shows you that it was 796 little people that was found hidden in a septic tank in a home run by nuns. Dirty Little Secrets. So we all know, as far as like monotheistic religion, all this is connected to Canaanite culture, because Canaanite culture is one of those dynamics that is basically the embodiment of trafficking, right? And that's all connected to the deep state shadow government. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, that's pretty much all I have for you guys today, because like I said, time is starting to run out. So I'm gonna sit here and politic with you guys for a second. So it's imperative to understand that Donald Trump is playing both sides. I told you, he's a 33-degree Scottish Rite Freemason. He's a white hat. White hat plays both. They play both sides. So this is why, like I said, when you start trying to pick a side, that's where you're going to get caught up into the illusion. Because one thing you got to understand about the Metatronic overlay, they give you the illusion of choice. You ain't got no choices, because it's only one truth on the planet. Because somebody's truth, it's only one reality on this planet, because somebody's truth can be a lie and somebody's lie can be the truth. So when you get stuck in polarity and you try to pick sides, that's when you're going to get caught up into the illusion. That's when you're going to get caught up into the technology, right? This is not the time to be picking sides. Oh, I'm with Iran and Russia and Israel and all this. I'm with America. That ain't the time to do that. Follow the path of the middle way, because when you follow the path of the middle way, that's when you're going to reach the apex of your spiritual journey, which is going to lead you to your authenticity, and your authenticity is going to lead you to your purpose. And your purpose is way beyond anything that was constructed by Western civilization. You don't need no damn job, because the corporation is falling. Everything that you see in our reality is being constructed by the energy of the sun, of the moon and Saturn, the Saturn moon matrix that operates on fractions of light that creates this holographic reality with the magneto-hydrodynamic Cassini gaps on the rings of Saturn that creates these subatomic particles, which is the illusion. Don't get caught up into the illusion of choice. They want you to be like, oh, this is truth, this is lies. No, reality stands as it is. The best way I can explain it, there's a such thing as a dark blue and a light blue, dark red, dark green, light green. But there is no such thing as a dark white or a light black. There is no such thing, because white and black represents reality. And reality is a state of existence that can't be manipulated. It can't be manipulated how the different color sequences, when you're talking about the different shades of colors, they can be manipulated, right? The primary colors, they can be manipulated. They can be dark and light, but you cannot manipulate white and black, because that's basically the epitome of reality. So you have to be operating from a place of reality to be able to see what's going on, to where you're able to activate, you activate your spiritual gifts to the point where you're able to be a seer. So with that being said, ladies and gentlemen, thanks for watching this video. End of transmission.
Be Frankie. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Man, my auntie passed last night. This is a sad life, I'm trying to get my cash right. Past bright, yeah, I'm shining like a flashlight. Trying to take off quick, might catch a fast flight. I'm mad tight, shitting on her with my ass wipes. Staying away from old friends, they all seem fake to me. Hating me, cause I'm getting dough just like the bakery. I'm tired of a mediocre life. I got hopes of Mike's fiend smoking pipes. This the second song that I wrote tonight. Haters smoking spite, how we got such a focused sight. I done flirted with death. 98 was the birth of the best. Grass cut from the surface I met. Rhymes I steadily spew, my hope will never be through. When it's all said and done, they'll remember me too. Life's a trip, regardless if the lace is tied. I'm spitting dope on my listeners, I make them high. The media got your brains baked in fried. Great supply, take your eyes and replace them with the ancient lies. I'm too cold, I spit hot. New flows for hip-hop, a few shows and get guap. New clothes, no wristwatch. I don't really care about your materialistic. Spazzing in the booth from ill than venereal sickness. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Gotta count my blessings even though I'm daily stressing. See, my brain is a weapon, I can use it for protection. You should take dabs off the rip like collections. Flows very often relative to beat selections. Block your number, cut you off, I hope you get the message. Hold the mic close to me like it's supposed to be. Haters act like they don't notice me, but I'm too focused, see. I devote to dreams and promote my schemes. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix. Yeah, I'm striving for greatness, trying to make it out. We're stuck in the matrix.